Hello and welcome to Discourse of Peacocks, where today we are going to be discussing Leeds United 3, Middlesbrough 1, in what was billed to be an extraordinary matchup for automatic or at least playoff promotion rivals, and it did not disappoint. We were electric. Middlesbrough did not sit back. Middlesbrough came at us. They were weak defensively in moments, but we already knew that that was going to be the case. But they were probably the best footballing team that has come to Elland Road this season, and I applaud them for actually coming to play football. It was quite refreshing considering how often we just go up against the same low block. We got well and truly humbled by Middlesbrough in August in the Carabao Cup. There was a lot of extenuating circumstances, understanding about Rutter leaving earlier on that day. We just weren't psychologically in a good place. And as well, obviously, quite a lot of the team, Verba included, hadn't really played much football, even through pre-season. So I think that we can be excused for that game. But we're going to get straight on to the good. I'm going to try and get through this as quick as possible. I am attempting to get a little bit shorter. Well, not height, because that'd be nigh on impossible, but in video length. So we'll go straight on to the good, which I have a really long list of good things for last night's game. We're top of the league. As of now, I'm recording before the Sheffield United game has kicked off this evening, so we might not be by the time you watch this, but we are guaranteed top two by the end of this game week, and it feels nice. It feels nice to have opened up that 3-point gap as well to Burnley. So it means that even if the worst was to happen and we were to lose and Burnley were to win, the likelihood is they're not scoring more than 2, and the likelihood is we're not losing by more than 1, because so far this season we've been beaten 1-0 3 times. So our goal difference would probably still keep us top 2, even if we get beaten by Preston. So that's really important. We've got the best goal difference in the league. We've scored the most goals in the league. We have conceded one of the fewest. Obviously we did concede last night, but it was an own goal. And the fact that we limited Middlesbrough, who have scored 3s, 4s, 5s and 6s in games, the fact that we reduced them to having, I believe, 0.3 XG overall, is absolutely outstanding, because they just score for fun. And the fact that they created next to little and they had to rely on an own goal scored by a set piece just goes to show how on it everybody from back to front, we were all just on it. And quickly, I'm just going to mention Meslier actually, because I thought his kicking occasionally scared me a little bit. We all know that kicking is not his kind of speciality when it comes to what he offers for Leeds, but his shot stopping last night was brilliant. The way that he closed down the Middlesbrough player to the point where if he doesn't get that right, that's a stone wall, really bad penalty. So the fact that he just made himself big, he got plenty of the ball, and he was just a solid, he was back to the old, Iceman routine. There was no kind of heat lamps on him last night. So I was very pleased for him, and I think it'll do him the world of good in terms of remembering that, he is actually allowed to be a good goalkeeper. He doesn't just have to sit there and allow his midfield and defence to... I made a comment the other day, actually, about the fact that Meslier very rarely keeps us in games, so when we are reliant on him, very rarely does he pull off saves that keep us in the game. He's often fluffed his lines the last season and a half. So I'm going to give him full props. He kept us, because at that point, I believe it was 1-1 at that point. So that would have taken them 2-1 up in quite a short space of time as well. The game could have completely flipped at that point. So props to Meslier for doing a really solid job. Dan James. Dan James. Dan James. He finally got a song. It was his 100th appearance for Leeds United. And I think some players let those kind of statistics get in their head and overdo things, whereas Dan James was just super on it. He wasn't over the top. He wasn't selfish. I don't think the word selfish is even in his kind of vocabulary. I just don't think he knows what that word means. He was fantastically defensively. He would have been in my starting lineup for this specific game, especially when you consider that we didn't have Bogle, and you would want somebody to help out with the running so that Sam Byram didn't have to fully run the flanks like we expect Bogle to do. So yeah, he would have been in my starting 11 anyway for this game. But I do think that he surpassed my expectations. I always know that he'll give 100% in a Leeds shirt, but he was just absolutely outstanding, and he caused so much mischief, for Middlesbrough. I bet they really hated him by the end of the game. And he should have had a couple of assists as well, because, Joseph clearly lacking a little bit of match sharpness, because there was some really good opportunities presented by Dan James that any sort of touch and it ends up in the back of the net. So, yeah, Dan James, he's my man. He is my man. Aronson, I thought, I've been critical of Aronson recently, but I think that he was pivotal. He was frustrating at times. Obviously, the shot that just went up into Rose Ed, he sometimes slowed down the attacks when he kind of ran out of space, and the move would break down. But he was one thing, he will never stop running, and he is so relentless, and he is so extraordinarily tedious to play against, I imagine. And he was brilliant. He was in the right place, the right time, obviously, to get the third goal, which just makes us all just have that sigh of relief, because I was saying to my husband the fact that I just had this real image of Sunderland in the back of my head of being 2-1 up in the 90th minute and then something happening. So that third goal just made me kind of sit back, relax, and just enjoy. I wasn't tense anymore. I'm always tense when I watch Leeds, but after that I kind of relaxed and chilled out. So yeah, Aronson was everywhere. He was absolutely everywhere, and he really looked like he had a point to prove. He made better decisions, not all of them, but if you compare it to a few games ago, the Blackburn game, he was making much better decisions. So full props to Aronson for that. I've just put Rothwell and Tanaka take a bow. And I don't think I actually need to go into that any further than that, because we all know what I mean by that. Tanaka was just everywhere again. Rothwell set pieces. If we can just get better at making contact, we now have somebody who can deliver a variety of corners and we actually look threatening. I know we didn't directly score from one last night. We did, but just in the wrong net. But if we can just make a little bit more connection with them, Rothwell, for me, he's just incredible. I absolutely love him. I'm so pleased that we've got him. And obviously I would never wish injuries on any of our players, but you do have to look at the silver lining. And the silver lining for Gruev and Ampadu being out was the fact that we've been able to see this incredibly dynamic duo of Rothwell and Tanaka. It's been a dream to watch them. It's just been pure magic to watch them flourish in a Leeds United shirt. Speaking of flourishing in a Leeds United shirt, Verba, I thought he was fantastic. Obviously, we were kind of, I don't know if Farke was almost setting us up to have lower expectations from Verba attacking wise. He, as much as said us that he's not going to get forward as much, he's more defensively minded, he's not as attacking as Junior Firpo, so we kind of should all forget and not judge Verba by Firpo attacking standards. But I thought he was almost borderline more attacking than Firpo last night. And obviously, he was my man of the match until the own goal went in. And I'm still tempted to give it to him because he didn't let his head drop. He was straight away trying to rectify his mistake. As soon as the goal had gone in and we were back up the other end of the pitch, he was there at the front of the attack. How many times did he find himself, the byline, fizzing a brilliantly, placed ball into the middle of the 6-yard box. So I thought the fact that, I have said it myself, and I'm sure lots of other people have said the fact that we think that he's going to go in January, etc., etc. You can easily let your head go after something like that, especially when it's your fault and you think, well, they don't want me to be here. I don't want to be here. I've just scored an own goal. I've just made a bit of a tit of myself. Let's just not do this then. I won't get injured in this game by trying to do anything, and I'll go in January. He didn't look like that at all. He really looked confident as well that he was going to make up for it. And yes, he didn't technically make up for it, with an actual goal or anything, but I admired his tenacity and the fact that he didn't stop, the fact that he continued going. He did start to kind of wane the last kind of maybe 15, 20 minutes, just because it's probably the most amount of running that he's done. Because I know obviously he played 90 minutes for Austria, but Leeds United is probably a slightly tougher ask in this league right now, with what we've got riding on every game. So yeah, I was really pleased with Max Verber. I'm going to make it men of the match because Dan James for me. I could give it Dan James every week, but I'm not actually just being kind of biased. He was brilliant, and it was his 100th appearance. So yeah, they can both share it. Byram, again, in theory, we lost our attacking impetus from the fullback position, but we didn't. Byram and Verber were both full of surprises, and they were both defensively solid, which we always know that they're going to be. But the tackle for the ball for Dan James's goal, I think. I'm sure that was Byram in the middle of the park. Just slid in, timed it to absolute perfection. And he obviously he was the one who passed it to Dan James for the first goal as well. So he was just everywhere. Both of our fullbacks, considering they're the less attacking options, were incredibly attacking. And I think that Daniel Farke got his team selection bang on, because we know Gnonto's defensive capabilities have improved massively this season. So therefore, Gnonto... My dogs are just barking. I apologise. I think it's done. Yeah, they were the less attacking options, and we didn't really lose any sort of attacking impetus. And the fact that Gnonto has improved with his defensive capabilities, and Dan James has always been defensively sound, they were both able to cover in attacking moments and defensive moments. And we all know that Daniel Farke expects all of his team to attack and all of his team to defend. So for me, that synergy between them, spot on. Props to Daniel Farke. I'm giving everybody props today. This is what happens when you beat a top of the league rival at home comfortably in the end. My final kind of real good point is that Ampadu came back, and we actually got to see him on the pitch as a right back. He did look a little bit kind of, you can tell he hadn't been playing and was playing out of position, but it was just nice to have him back on the pitch. It was nice to see him barking orders. It was just, nice to hear, his song going round Elland Road. It was also brilliant to just see that. What a wonderful headache to have, because I wouldn't drop many people. And after that performance, I don't think I'd even drop Aronson. Maybe away from home, possibly. But yeah, it means that we can ease him back in. So yeah, just a final little nod to Ampadu that it was lovely to have him back on the ground at Elland Road. We're going to move on to the very limited and picky bad stuff. I've really gone overboard with my exaggeration on this one. We need 300,000 shots in order to get a goal, because in that first half we should have been at least 3-0 up by half time. Just Joseph lacking match sharpness. I know that when you look at his minutes played versus Piro's minutes played, they're very similar, but most of those minutes came before the 1st of October. And we had the international break at the end of August, an international break in September, and an international break in November, I think, as well. It's like we've had such a stop-start, and he hasn't consistently played since the 1st of October. He's had 2 starts, QPR and last night, both home games and both games that we've won, to be fair. And it's really hard to justify Joseph starting over Piro when Piro obviously came on and he got an assist. But I do think in games like this, where you're either going up against the best or the worst, you're going to come up against, people who know how to defend, whether it's the only thing that they've got or whether it's one of the things that they've got. I just think Joseph stretches the defenders, which then allows Piro to be clinical right at the end. But it is really hard to justify when Piro's got the numbers and Joseph doesn't. I feel sorry for Daniel Parker in that respect, because I do think that it's a similar problem to the Bamford one, in the fact of, we always used to play better when Bamford was on the pitch, but he would then miss so many chances. And Joseph was a bit like that yesterday. His movement is so brilliant. He gets himself into perfect spaces, but because of his match sharpness, he was just arriving there like an inch too late. And then, the irony is we actually got the opposite when Piro came on. He was like arriving an inch too early. So, yeah, I'm not going to batter anybody because nobody played poorly at all in that game. But I think Joseph needs a few more minutes in order for, him to be able to finish those chances, because when Piro comes off the bench, he has often made an impact. So far, when Joseph has come off the bench, he hasn't made an impact. So I do think that has to be taken into account at some point, of the fact of, I feel confident and almost positive when Piro comes off. I don't feel that way if Joseph doesn't start. He doesn't really make that much of an impact. And again, that's really similar to Bamford. Players like that seem to need to warm up in the game. They can't just come on from cold, whereas Piro seems to be, because he is fairly clinical, he seems to be able to come out from cold against, exhausted bodies and get the job done. So, yeah, difficult for Farker, I think. And I think we underappreciate as fans the internal kind of conflict that he's going to be going through. I know he's paid a lot of money, and that's fine. I would quite happily be paid that money to make those decisions. But I do have sympathy for Farker. Also, Rodon went down, Rothwell went down. Both of them had to leave the pitch and come back on, and Rothwell seemed to walk it off slightly better. Rodon did look a bit shaky, so I wouldn't be surprised if one of them or both of them are out for the weekend's game, because it's obviously such a quick turnaround. But I really hope not, because we will miss Rothwell. I borderline think that with Ampadu back, we could potentially not miss Rodon as much. Not to underestimate what Rodon does for us, but yeah, I think we could potentially miss Rothwell more now that we seem to, we're these set piece taking gods now. But yeah, I really, really hope that they're okay. But that goes along with the referee. I know it's a good stream and therefore I shouldn't be moaning about things, but I want to be consistent, and I would have moaned about this had we have dropped any points. So I'm still going to moan about it now, even though we got all 3. The referee, obviously, there was the penalty shout, and in the Premier League, I really do think that's given. It would have been really soft, and I would have borderline said if it had been the other way around, I'd have been kind of okay with not being given it. But I do think if we were in the Premier League, that would have been given. But the ref was looking right at it, and it's contact with consequence, and there wasn't enough. There was contact, but he made a meal out of it, and he screamed. Like, I'm sorry. Like, he screamed like he'd been shot. Grow up. Sorry, that's a little rant there. But the ref refused to book their players for ages. There was a foul on Rothwell where he got pulled back by the back of his shirt, and they got the advantage. I just couldn't actually believe it. And I was like, oh yeah, well, he's going to get a yellow card. So he's not got a yellow card, and they've got the advantage. Absolutely astoundingly poor refereeing. He just had no control over it, and they were allowed to commit foul after foul, and blatant fouls as well, not even just subtle ones, as in breakaway fouls when we were on the break. So many players should have been yellow carded for the exact same type of yellow card. Astounding, absolutely astounding. Right, let's calm down a bit and we'll go on to the final section, because that's all the bad things. It was not actually really about anything that we did, because we were incredible. The team. So I think that we're getting the good feeling back, like we had at kind of, during the run in January and February and March, where everybody just looked so kind of together and looked like they loved one another, and that these were, friendships and like they were brothers in arms, and all of those other kind of cliches. But, Nonto running to Gilavogi after he scored, I think that just shows what an impact that Gilavogi is having behind the scenes. I think it shows the fact that Nonto is maturing. I think it shows the fact that he's glad that he's here. All of these things, the fact it was the same with everybody celebrating with Max Verber last week. The same with everybody taking the mick out of Rodon for finally scoring. They just look so genuinely happy. They all look happy for one another. And, everybody looked really happy with Dan James when he scored. Obviously, it was quite a significant game, with it being his 100th game for Leeds United. And the fact that he, just helped us out in so many defensive opportunities as well. I don't want to turn this into a big, Dan James loving, because you already know that that's the way I am anyway. But the egos seem to be less this year. You've got to have ego, I think, to be successful as a footballer, but the amount of ego on show seems to have lowered this year. Even Solomon looked momentarily annoyed with Aronson for kind of pinching the ball off his toes when Tanaka crossed it back. I do genuinely think that Tanaka was aiming for Aronson, but Solomon did momentarily look a little bit miffed that he'd just had his goal essentially taken off him by Aronson, but then snapped out of that and ran straight away over and celebrated. So I think things like that really you've got a good indication of what things are like behind the scenes if you're able to feel frustrated because, sportsmanship kind of thing, and that you're competitive, but then instantly say, oh, well, no, that's good for us, so I'm happy. I think that's a real credit to what Farke has built in terms of the team aspect and the team morale and the side before self, and the fact that it's not just a cliche, it is an actual thing that all of them should be adhering to and wanting to showcase, basically. Farke showed an incredible kind of punch and release of emotion after the third goal went in, and it's not often that you see him he'll celebrate, he'll do a kind of a silent like this or something. He's not quite as silent as Bielsa, but very rarely does he really extravagantly show emotion, and he did, which was really, he knew it was a big game as well. And, for as much as he has this cool, calm exterior, he feels it too. And I think that he wants the best for his team, the team want the best for one another, and they want the best for Farke. And all of that means that they all want the best for us. And that's what we want too. Yeah, slightly falling in love with this team, which is always a dangerous thing. So we have to get promoted so that I don't get my heart broken again. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. That's it. So I haven't really managed to keep it any shorter than normal. So I do apologise for that, but you'll just have to deal with it. If you agree, disagree with anything that I've said today, any opinions, favourite part of the game, favourite player, any disgruntled moments or anything, then please let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, become a member if you want to. And yeah, I will see you in the next one. Bye.